Tonight, global security analysts and military planners are confronting one of the most dangerous escalatory warnings to emerge from the Middle East in decades. A growing chorus of intelligence assessments, strategic reports, and military briefings is focusing on a stark and deeply unsettling possibility that Iran's expanding missile arsenal could devastate major population and infrastructure centers across Israel and key Gulf states if a direct war between the United States and Iran were to erupt. This warning is not being issued in isolation or as speculative rhetoric. Instead, it reflects years of documented military development, regional proxy conflicts, and rapidly shifting geopolitical alignments that have brought the region to a precarious strategic tipping point. To understand how this scenario has emerged, we must first examine the trajectory of Iran's missile program, which has evolved from a defensive deterrence capability into a sophisticated and multi-layered offensive strike network. Over the past 2 decades, Iran has invested heavily in ballistic missile technology, cruise missile innovation, and unmanned aerial strike systems. The strategic purpose behind these developments has been clear. Iran lacks a conventional air force comparable to the United States or Israel, but it has compensated by building one of the largest and most diverse missile inventories in the world. These missiles are designed to overwhelm advanced air defense systems through saturation attacks, precision targeting, and increasingly sophisticated maneuverability. Iranian military doctrine emphasizes asymmetric warfare, a strategy built on offsetting technological disadvantages with tactical creativity and regional networked alliances. Iranian planners have repeatedly emphasized that any large-scale attack on Iranian territory or regime infrastructure would trigger retaliatory strikes not only against American military assets, but also against regional allies that Tehran views as integral components of U.S. power projection. Israeli urban centers, including Tel Aviv, and economic hubs throughout Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, are frequently referenced in strategic simulations as potential targets. In a retaliatory escalation scenario, the timeline leading to today's heightened concern can be traced back to several key turning points. The collapse of diplomatic frameworks surrounding Iran's nuclear and military ambitions removed crucial channels of de-escalation and monitoring. The intensification of Israeli covert and overt strikes against Iranian military installations in Syria and beyond deepened hostilities. Meanwhile, ongoing proxy conflicts across Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria have allowed Iran to deploy missile technologies through allied militias, effectively extending its strike reach without direct state-to-state warfare. Each of these developments has contributed to a strategic environment in which miscalculation or escalation could rapidly spiral into open conflict. Tel Aviv, often viewed as Israel's economic and technological heart, represents both symbolic and strategic significance. It houses critical infrastructure, financial institutions, and dense civilian populations, making it a focal point in discussions of deterrence and vulnerability. Israel has invested heavily in layered air defense systems, including Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow Missile Defense Network. These systems have demonstrated effectiveness in intercepting smaller-scale rocket and missile attacks. However, military analysts consistently warn that even the most advanced defensive architecture can be overwhelmed by large-scale, multi-directional missile barrages, particularly when combined with drone swarms and cruise missile strikes that approach targets from low altitudes and unpredictable flight paths. Similarly, Gulf states have become increasingly prominent players in regional security alignments, particularly through economic modernization efforts and defense partnerships with Washington. Cities such as Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai serve as vital economic centers and logistical nodes for global energy markets. Iran's missile reach extends across the Persian Gulf, and previous incidents have demonstrated Tehran's willingness to target energy infrastructure when strategic pressures intensify. The 2019 attacks on Saudi oil facilities highlighted both the vulnerability of critical infrastructure and the global economic consequences that can follow. Even limited strike operations. Reactions to the current escalation warnings vary widely across the international community. U.S. defense officials emphasize deterrence, maintaining that American naval and aerial superiority would ultimately neutralize Iranian military capabilities in a prolonged conflict. Israeli security leadership remains publicly confident in its defensive preparedness while privately acknowledging the enormous human and economic costs that sustained missile warfare could produce. Gulf states continue to expand missile defense investments while simultaneously pursuing diplomatic channels aimed at reducing direct confrontation with Tehran. Beyond military calculations, the economic consequences of such a conflict would be staggering. The Persian Gulf remains one of the most vital arteries of global energy transportation, and sustained missile exchanges could disrupt shipping lanes, damage refinery infrastructure, and destabilize global markets. Energy prices could spike dramatically, triggering ripple effects across international economies already grappling with inflation, supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical uncertainty. The strategic reality confronting policymakers is that modern warfare in the Middle East would likely unfold far differently from past conflicts. Precision missile warfare compresses response timelines, increases civilian exposure, and reduces the possibility of controlled escalation. As tensions continue to build, the question facing global leaders is not merely whether deterrence will hold, but whether current diplomatic and military frameworks are sufficient to prevent a cascade of retaliatory actions that could redefine regional stability for generations. As analysts examine the strategic balance between Iran and its adversaries, the focus increasingly turns toward the scale, diversity, and operational doctrine of Iran's missile forces. Iran has developed a layered arsenal that includes short-range ballistic missiles, medium-range precision strike systems, cruise missiles, and long-range drones capable of reaching targets across the Middle East. These weapons are not merely symbolic deterrents. They are integrated into a broader military philosophy designed to neutralize technologically superior opponents through sustained, coordinated, and overwhelming strike campaigns. One of the most significant developments in Iran's missile evolution has been its increasing emphasis on accuracy and maneuverability. Early generations of Iranian missiles were often criticized for their limited precision. However, recent intelligence assessments suggest substantial improvements in guidance systems, enabling strikes that could target specific military installations, energy infrastructure, and urban population centers with increasing reliability. These advancements complicate defensive planning for Israel and Gulf states as they reduce the margin for interception errors and increase the likelihood of strategic damage even during partially successful defense operations. Iran's regional alliance network further amplifies its military reach. Groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon possess extensive rocket and missile inventories that could open additional fronts against Israel. In Yemen, Houthi forces have demonstrated the ability to launch long-range missile and drone attacks against Saudi and Emirati targets. Iraqi militia groups aligned with Iran have also expanded their missile capabilities. Collectively, these proxy forces create a distributed strike network capable of launching simultaneous attacks from multiple geographic directions, significantly complicating defensive coordination for Iran's adversaries. Israel's defense strategy relies heavily on technological superiority and rapid response capabilities. Its multi-layered missile defense architecture is widely regarded as among the most advanced in the world. Iron Dome is designed to intercept short-range rockets. David's Sling addresses medium-range threats, and the Arrow system focuses on long-range ballistic missiles. However, military planners acknowledge that defense systems are inherently probabilistic rather than absolute. A sufficiently large and synchronized missile barrage could saturate interception systems, allowing some projectiles to reach their targets despite advanced defensive technologies. Gulf states face similar challenges, though their defensive infrastructures vary in sophistication and integration. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have invested billions of dollars in missile defense systems, including Patriot batteries and advanced radar networks. Despite these investments, previous attacks have demonstrated vulnerabilities, particularly when defensive systems are confronted with coordinated drone and cruise missile strikes designed to bypass radar detection through low-altitude flight paths and complex routing strategies. The United States maintains significant military assets across the region, including naval fleets, air bases, and forward-deployed missile defense systems. American military doctrine emphasizes overwhelming retaliatory capability and rapid suppression of enemy missile launch sites. However, the geographic dispersion and mobility of Iranian missile units present formidable operational challenges. Many launch systems are designed for rapid deployment and concealment, often positioned in hardened underground facilities or mobile launch platforms that can relocate quickly to avoid detection. Escalation dynamics in such a conflict would likely unfold in rapid and unpredictable stages. Initial U.S. or Israeli strikes targeting Iranian military infrastructure could trigger immediate retaliatory missile attacks against regional allies. Iran's strategy appears to rely on expanding the battlefield geographically, increasing the political and economic cost of continued military engagement for Washington and its partners. This strategy is rooted in deterrence through pain infliction rather than battlefield territorial conquest. Regional reactions to this escalating threat environment remain complex and multifaceted. Some Gulf states have cautiously pursued diplomatic engagement with Iran, seeking to reduce the likelihood of direct confrontation. These diplomatic overtures reflect recognition that even limited conflict could devastate economic diversification. Projects and foreign investment initiatives that are central to long-term national development strategies. Meanwhile, Israel continues to emphasize preemptive deterrence, arguing that allowing Iranian missile capabilities to expand unchecked poses an existential threat to national security. Global powers are also closely monitoring these developments. European governments generally advocate diplomatic de-escalation and revival of arms control negotiations, while China and Russia pursue strategic partnerships with Iran that further complicate Western military planning. The intersection of great power competition and regional conflict risks transforming a localized war into a broader geopolitical confrontation with far-reaching global consequences. While military strategists often focus on technological capabilities and battlefield scenarios, the human consequences of large-scale missile warfare would be catastrophic. Urban centers such as Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and Dubai represent densely populated metropolitan regions with complex infrastructure systems that sustain millions of residents. Missile strikes targeting energy facilities, transportation hubs, and communication networks could create cascading humanitarian crises marked by mass displacement, medical system collapse, and prolonged economic paralysis. Civil defense preparations across Israel and Gulf states include advanced warning systems, fortified shelters, and emergency response planning. However, the sheer scale of potential missile barrages raises serious questions about the capacity of these systems to protect civilian populations during sustained conflict. Modern missile warfare compresses reaction time to minutes or even seconds, leaving limited opportunity for evacuation or infrastructure protection once hostilities begin. The global economic implications of such a conflict would extend far beyond the Middle East. The Persian Gulf serves as a central artery for global oil and natural gas exports. Disruption of shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz could dramatically reduce global energy supply, triggering price surges that would reverberate across industrial, transportation, and agricultural sectors worldwide, financial markets would likely experience severe volatility, and supply chain disruptions could exacerbate existing economic vulnerabilities in both developed and emerging economies. Political consequences would also reshape international alliances and strategic alignments. A prolonged Middle Eastern war could strain NATO cohesion, intensify US-China competition, and encourage further militarization across volatile regions. Smaller nations dependent on stable energy markets and global trade flows would face disproportionate economic and political instability. The ripple effects could influence migration patterns, humanitarian aid demands, and international security priorities for years or even decades. The future trajectory of this escalating confrontation ultimately depends on the decisions of political leadership across multiple capitals. Diplomatic engagement, arms control negotiations, and regional confidence-building measures represent potential pathways to de-escalation. However, historical precedent demonstrates that miscalculation, domestic political pressure, and ideological confrontation can rapidly override diplomatic caution during periods of heightened military tension. The warning embedded in current strategic assessments is not merely about missile technology or military balance. It is about the accelerating speed at which modern warfare can escalate beyond the control of policymakers once initial strikes occur. The integration of advanced missile systems, drone warfare, cyber operations, and proxy conflict networks creates a volatile environment in which regional conflict can expand into global crisis with unprecedented speed. As the world watches tensions between the United States, Iran, Israel, and Gulf states continue to evolve, the central lesson emerging from this moment is the fragile nature of deterrence in an era of technological warfare. Military superiority does not guarantee strategic stability, and defensive capability does not eliminate vulnerability. The consequences of miscalculation would not be confined to military installations or geopolitical rivalries. They would unfold across civilian populations, global markets, and international political structures that depend upon stability in one of the world's most strategically critical regions. The ultimate question facing global leadership is whether the pursuit of strategic dominance will override the recognition that modern missile warfare offers no clear victory, only escalating cycles of retaliation and destruction. History repeatedly demonstrates that wars begun under assumptions of controlled escalation often evolve into prolonged and devastating conflicts. The current warnings surrounding Iran's missile capabilities serve as a sobering reminder that the margin for diplomatic failure is narrowing, and the cost of strategic misjudgment may be measured not only in geopolitical power shifts, but in human lives and global stability itself.